Hi everyone, John here with Fountain Pen Love, and today I want to talk to you about getting started doodling with your fountain pens. Now this is going to be part of a series of pen positivity videos that I do, and the purpose around these is mainly to help you feel good about yourself and using fountain pens. There's a lot of stuff going on out there on social media. You see people with beautiful handwriting with these amazing doodles with, pens that cost a lot of money, and you might look at your collection or your skills and say, I don't know, I'm just not that good. And I'm here to tell you that doesn't matter. What matters is enjoying using your fountain pens, having fun with it, and finding good ways to spend your time. So, with that in mind, here's the first of my pen positivity videos. Doodling with my fountain pens is something that I love doing. Now, I'm not very good at drawing things, so if you showed me a picture or handed me this pen, showed me a house, a horse, a face, I wouldn't be able to draw a very good picture of it. But just random shapes, different patterns, things like that, I love doing. And the main reason is it gives me a chance to take my pen, use it, put some ink on some paper. And that's really what it's all about for me, is just spending some quality time with my pens, getting ink onto the paper. So what I want to do today is kind of go over some of the things if you've never doodled before, if you're just getting into it, or if you tried it and haven't had very much success with it. Give you a few things to get you started, a few pointers to help you out, and hopefully give you a little bit of inspiration. So the first thing I want to talk about is the paper that you use. In my opinion, using the right paper for doodling is the most important decision you can make. Now, using cheap paper not only is not fun to write on, but can also really bleed or feather, which it just doesn't make your doodles look very good. So I highly recommend splurging on a decent notebook or some decent paper that you can use for your doodling. I really prefer Midori MD paper, which is what these little notebooks are. It's also what I use for my bullet journal. It's a great all-around daily paper. Shows off the qualities of your ink with decent dry times, and overall is pleasant to write on. Another great option is Tomoe River, and that's what this larger notebook is here. It's very easy to use, stands up to water really well, and overall is just fantastic paper. It does have a slightly longer dry time than lots of other papers, but if you're doodling, you're probably just doing one page at a time, so that's not really going to matter that much. So choose a paper that you like, that you enjoy writing on, that really shows off your ink, and you'll have a much better time. The next thing you'll want to think about is the ink that you use. Now, ink is very important for a couple of different reasons. First off, it's got to make you happy. So I love shading inks. I use a lot of shading inks when I doodle, and I really enjoy it. But you might just want to use black, and that's totally fine if doodling in black makes you happy. The one type of inks I would caution against, or at least, give you some hesitation, are high sheening inks. Now, trust me, they look beautiful when you doodle with them. They're so much fun just to kind of hold your paper, look at the sheen, but they do tend to smear. They take longer to dry than shading inks or other inks. They also have a lot of excess dye in them that sits on the page, so even when they're dry, when you move your hand across them, they can smear, and it's not really a lot of fun when you have this beautiful doodle you've been working on, spending hours probably, and then you have a nice smear across the middle because you rubbed your hand on it, or maybe just laid your hand on it for too long. So sheening inks look great, but just be careful when you use them. I do have a tip for that though, which I'll tell you in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about the pens that you use. Choosing the right pen to make your doodling more enjoyable is also very important. Now, I love big, broad, wet nibs, but you might love a fine nib that's fairly dry. Whatever you prefer writing with may or may not be what you prefer doodling with. It's just really something you'll need to try and test out and see what you enjoy. So I like the big wet nibs because they put down a lot of ink, they really show off the ink, and it's not so hard to make a page more full because the lines are bigger. When I use small, fine nibs, they really, it seems like they take a lot longer to fill up a page, because my lines are so thin, it looks empty, so I feel like I have to draw more. With a big, fat, wet nib, it really fills up the page. It makes me feel like I've accomplished something in a lot less time. Now, two other things that I use fairly often when I doodle are a binder clip and a guide sheet. And this is basically just a plastic thing. It's meant to go underneath your sheet so you can follow the grid, but really any piece of plastic or piece of paper will do, because the way you use this is you typically, when you're doodling, your hand's going to be resting on the paper. Now that can do two things. It can smear the ink that's already on the paper, and it can also put oils from your hand onto the paper, which can then sometimes affect how the ink is absorbed into the paper. So what I typically like to do, I'll have my pen, I'll have my paper, and I'll just rest my hand and even my hand that's holding the notebook down on this guide sheet, and then I can just draw right above it, and I don't have to worry about either of these hands touching the paper. It might seem a little burdensome at first, but honestly, once you've done it for a little bit, you get used to it and it's not a big deal at all. So typically I'll have one of these on top of the paper that I can draw, move it around. As I move the notebook around, I just move this around a little bit, and it really does a great job both at preventing smearing from your hand and at keeping hand oils off of the paper. Now the other thing I use is this binder clip. And the reason is, a lot of times, like say I have this smaller notebook, it's just nice to kind of hold one side open so that I can draw on the other side. So it really doesn't do that much as far as helping you with the doodle, but it does help you keep your place, helps pages keep from flopping over, and it's also helpful in photographing. If you wanted to go ahead and take a picture of your doodle, you could put a clip on each side and it would hold your notebook open so that it's not going to close up or raise off the table. So this, not as necessary as this, but I would highly recommend either a piece of paper or a guide sheet like this to protect your paper as you doodle. So now let's talk about inspiration. I know when I first started doodling, I had no idea what to draw. So I'd sit down with my pen and paper and do nothing because I didn't know what to do. So I started looking online. I started looking for people who doodled on Instagram. I started looking up drawing and doodling inspiration, and I came across something called Zentangles. And Zentangles, if you're not familiar with them, are basically repeating patterns that you can draw. They typically connect to each other, and when you draw a bunch of them, they turn into a really nice looking picture. It's basically just a pattern that repeats, and this was one of the first ones. Actually, this is my book number 1. I started numbering my doodle books, and this was number 1, Doodle 1. Probably not the first one I ever did, but basically the first one that I did officially in a book. Super simple, as you can tell. And they basically progressed. I did a variation on that, kind of changed it up a little bit, and this is actually a Zen doodle pattern. I'm not sure what it's called, but if you just Google Zen doodle patterns, you'll find everything from beginner to advanced. There should be something in there that catches your eye, and I will tell you, some look super simple, and they're not. They're really tough to draw, so stick with it. If you find one that you don't enjoy doing, find a different one and try it out, because you will find one sooner or later that you enjoy. And I probably drew this one, 4 or 5 times, 5 different patterns, different attempts, and different variations before I got tired of it and wanted to try something else. So at that point, I started looking online. And on Instagram, if you just look through fountain pen accounts, you'll see lots of different people who do drawings, who do doodles, lots of inspiration out there. And I came across one guy, I can't remember what his name is, but he had just something similar to this. And it was basically just a series of lines that overlapped, interlocked. And I was like, I can do that, I'll try it out. So I tried it out and I really enjoyed it. This was the start of something for me that I still do to this day with different variations, but something like this where it's a little more organic, a little more free flow, a little more improvised, really appeals to me. So whereas the Zen doodles tend to be fairly structured, I like something like this that I can just kind of make up on the fly and go along with it. So definitely look online. Don't be afraid to copy people. You don't have to show them. They don't have to know you copied them. They'd probably be flattered if you did copy them. But don't be afraid to just look down, look at someone's pattern, look at someone's drawing a doodle, and say, I'm going to try that, and then try and recreate it. You'll learn a lot about what works and what doesn't, and you'll also have fun doing it. So I took this pattern and I started adding my own twist to it. I filled in all of the empty space here with little circles, which to me was really enjoyable. A bit of a pain though, because that's a lot of little circles. So compared to this one where I just kind of had everything filled in with ink, these circles took a lot more time. I like the way they look, but I didn't quite enjoy it as much as just filling in with ink because, I mean, let's be honest, painting with ink is a lot of fun. And then eventually I discovered a new pattern. I kind of stayed on that for a while, and I will say I've just kind of gone from there. I've found patterns, played with them, made them my own, tweaked them, moved them around, did different things, and 5, 6 sketchbooks later, or well, notebooks later, I'm still going. I'm still doing a lot of different things. So a few things I want to point out are kind of my progress as I doodled. So this is in my second doodle book, and this was one of the very first doodles where I combined different elements. It really took me outside of my comfort zone to have two different things that I had been drawing overlap, but I think it turned out pretty well, and from here on out it was just a lot of experimentation and different colliding of styles. So this was another one where I kind of just, you can see the same kind of shapes in here repeated in here along with some other patterns. Same with this, I just started taking things that I had been drawing, adding to them, modifying them, and it really, really started to get enjoyable. In one of my future books here, this is book number 4, I think, this was just completely out of my head. I just sat down, started drawing shapes, and this is what I ended up with. Same here, this was inspired by someone else on Instagram, Pensive Candy. If you follow her, you will probably know that she does a lot of great doodles. This was a few years ago, and I really just saw something in one of her doodles that I liked, copied it, modified it, made it my own, but it was definitely a copy initially. And you can see even my doodle books just have random stuff in them. Moving from this paper notebook to this one, this was one of the biggest ones I'd done, and so far my biggest notebook to date. It's an A5 size. It is tough to fill a page that's this size. These smaller ones you can see significantly smaller, take less time to fill the page. But again, inspired by other people's doodles, I think this is actually a Zentangle pattern that I took and copied and just kind of made it a little more organic. This you can see very similar to that gray doodle that I just showed you, but with some added lines. This is the first one that I truly considered my own. This came from just something that I saw when I was drawing lines randomly one day, and I said I could make that into a pattern, and sure enough, I did. I also started experimenting with water, so adding water to a page instead of just ink, and you can see it definitely takes its toll on the backside, but this is amazing paper, Tomoe River, and it doesn't come all the way through, so don't be afraid to use ink and water if you want to. And finally, that brings us up to the present day. This is my current doodle album. In this one, I'm trying to use 2 colors on every page, and hopefully they look good together. This was kind of inspired by someone else's pattern that I saw. Sometimes I just enjoy drawing straight lines and looking at the shading of an ink. I think these 2 colors go so well together. And again, you'll see this was very similar to one you just saw a minute ago with some added circles and dots. And yeah, very similar to this one, but with some lines thrown in. So basically, in short, make it your own. Don't be afraid to copy other people or get inspiration from them at least, and have fun doing it. Now, one last thing I want to point out in here, I do have the ink and pen that I used for each one, and I put it on the back side. So this doesn't go with this, it goes with this. So in this particular doodle, if I ever said, man, that was a great color combination, I can come back, see what pens and inks that I used, and recreate it or do something similar if I really wanted to. So hopefully that's inspiring. Hopefully that shows you a little bit, and let's wrap up. So I hope that gave you some inspiration. The one thing I want you to take away from this is these doodles should be just for you. You don't have to share them on Instagram. You don't have to show them to anyone else. As long as you have fun doing them, as long as they make you happy, as long as they help you to pass the time, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter how they look. It doesn't matter who likes them on Instagram. It doesn't matter if you even show them to anyone. As long as you have fun doing them, you should just keep on doing them. So until next time, I hope you have fun doodling. If you enjoy what you see, please feel free to subscribe to this channel, and happy writing and doodling.